So the way this is going to go, as John said, I'm going to give a brief overview, and then I'll be followed by the three speakers from the region. And if you bear with me for 1 second, because we got to get them up on Skype. After which we will have Dr. Abbas Wali, who's a world famous specialist on politics and the Kurds. And so he'll be Skyping as well from Boğaziçi in Istanbul. But the three speakers from the region include Salih Muslim, who was a previous co-leader of the Rojava Autonomous Administration. And many of these people can't tell us exactly where they are because they're in danger. Sevinaz Evdike is another person who'll be speaking, who's a women's activist and a journalist from Qamishli. And she's been a longtime activist in women's organizations. And Ossamah Mohammad, a local activist from Qamishli. So we'll have two people definitely from Qamishli, which was target of air campaigns by the Turkish military. So just to start, I go ahead, we'll go forward. Yes, okay. So just some background for people who don't know that much about the Kurds as a people. They are located in roughly this area, which, as you can see, crosses many international boundaries, 4 or 5 or 6 different countries, but they're concentrated in the region of Iraq, Iran, Syria, and Turkey, Turkey having the largest number of Kurds there. Of course, there's a great diaspora. People have been spread out through conflict, employment, migration to other countries. And we don't exactly know the totals. And former classmate of mine did these maps, and sometimes, he overestimates, underestimates, and we don't know. So you can see some of the statistics he provides. He estimates that 50% of Turkey is Kurdish. I'm sort of hesitant on that number. I think that's a little too much. But in any event, this region is important for many reasons. So here you have this very large number of Kurds who were a very large number, a distinct ethnic group with several different languages, 2 or 3 major Kurdish languages in this region, and sort of breaks down in terms of where people are located. Originally both sedentary and pastoral nomadic, but they were settled in this mountainous region, which is strategic today for many reasons, not only because of the border situation, the fact that you have these very large numbers of ethnically diverse people in countries which claim to be all Arab, all Turkish, all Persian. But in addition, this region is the mountainous region of the Middle East whence all the rivers flow. So it is the headwater of all the major rivers in the region. And to control this region, you basically control the lifeline of the entire region in terms of water, agriculture, hydroelectric. And Turkey has controlled most of it at this point, and is putting dams throughout the region, and slowly, basically strangling downstream countries, including Iraq and Syria, are getting less and less water because of Turkey's damming projects. But similar projects are going on in Iran as well, in the Iranian Kurdish mountains. So you can see this picture and why the Kurds, this large number, many times the size of the Palestinians, not detracting anything from Palestinian rights, but Kurdish rights, should be up there as well. They're, in the region, there are at least 10 times as many Kurds as Palestinians. So we move to the next slide. Go forward. Yeah, okay. So the political history, and I tried to truncate it, basically is this, that up until almost the end of the 19th century, this region between states, there were states there was an Iranian state, there was the Ottoman Empire, had been fairly autonomous. And as late as the 1880s, there was an attempt to maintain at least one autonomous emirate in the region, which would subsequently be squelched and squashed by a combination of Ottoman and Iranian forces. However, that didn't prevent Kurds from organizing, from developing their own national consciousness, from lobbying at Versailles, and in the first treaty, the treaty that wouldn't ultimately settle the region in Sèvres in 1920, there were actually, and you can see it in the inner circle here, so the border proposed by the Kurdish delegation at the Paris Peace Conference in Versailles, they had the request for a nation state in what today would have been Iraq, Syria, and would stay Iraq, Syria, and Turkey. Sèvres, that treaty gave them a state, much smaller, not as they wished, but Sèvres would be overturned by the Turkish military and the Turkish nationalist movement in Turkey, which carved out a much larger area. And of course, the mandatory powers who took over the British in Iraq, the French in Syria, and the British, of course, in Palestine. That, desired outcome was ended. There would be another attempt to form a state, the Mohammad Republic, right after World War II, and that too, when the Soviets lost their support for Mohammad, that too was crushed and the leadership was hung. And since that time, the Kurds have been considered this fifth column in all of these states, neither with them, neither within the region, but potentially having alliances with other parties or with other Kurdish groups outside. And so you can see that throughout the region, without exception, the movements for autonomy, even autonomy, have been violently repressed. Expressions of Kurdish identity have been denied, so language, costume, showing of national flags or, of other sorts. Kurds have been forcibly removed, ethnic cleansing, I hate that term because it's sort of a way to downgrade what is otherwise should be called genocide, forms of genocide. Kurds have been removed from their homes throughout the region. They've been stripped of citizenship. They've been stripped of citizenship in many cases. In Syria, for example, their property has been confiscated. They've been imprisoned, tortured, executed. And in the case of 1988, at the end of the Iran-Iraq War, a case of genocide, according to the international community, in Halabja in Iraq, where many thousands of Kurds were subjected to horrific gas attack. In addition, as I said, the Kurds have been removed, and in their place, other populations, deliberate replacement of populations in this area, a process that's continuing now as we speak, with the Turks as they move in and they force out, at this point, we don't know how many 100,000 Kurds have been forced out, and other populations. They're being systematically replaced with Arabic speakers, probably of the Sunni branch of Islam, with ties and basically obligations to the Erdogan regime when they're going to be replaced. So this has been happening and it's continuing right now. And I have to say, what makes the Kurdish case also special is that Kurds being divided, having these leaderships that are making deals with various central states at different times, this kind of lack of coordination from not having a nation state. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to. Yeah, okay. All right. So their suffering and aspirations have been exploited by regional and superpowers, including, of course, the United States. The Israelis are there, but other countries have also played that role. So I'm going to be interrupted right now. Who's speaking?
Salih.
He's speaking from
Rojava.
Rojava. Okay. So. So this is Salih Muslim. He's a previous co-leader of the Autonomous Administration. No, no, you do, okay. Let's see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Hello. I will. Welcome. Thank you for. Yes, but speak up. I think we lost the connection. Yes.
We can hear you.
Yes. You can keep speaking. You can keep speaking, please. Yeah. Oh, no, thank you for being with us. Yeah, that's important for us to know. Yeah. How many refugees do you estimate from the areas that were shelled? How many refugees have been? Yes. Were the leaders of the political leaders targeted by Turkish and administrative buildings, or was it just all areas? Were there specific targets to get YPG leadership in the Turkish assault? Yeah. Oh, the Daesh from ISIS. Yeah. This is another speaker, Fuad Olesi, who's here.
Suad, a question for you about the ceasefire agreement that was just announced from Turkey between Pence and the Turkish state. Would you like to please comment more on that?
He said, yeah, he explained that even though there's a ceasefire, the fighting's still going on, and the government, Rojava, has accepted the ceasefire. They've ceased firing, but they're still shelling and they're still bombing from the Turkish side. So that's still going on. Have there been, is there reporters coming into the area who are reporting on this? Because here in Canada, there's been very little direct news. How are people getting out the news and what mediums? From okay. More questions? Okay. That we can get here. Tell us what you think is the best thing we can do in Canada for you. What can we do here from Canada? Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, no, I agree. Canada and other Western countries should withdraw their ambassadors to Turkey in protest. Yes. Yeah, peacekeeping force. Okay, we thank you so much for speaking with us. This is really unique, and We wish you well, and we send solidarity from our little town in Canada. And, hope you are safe, okay? We're going to be speaking with other activists from the region.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we'll be going to other activists now, 3 other people. Can we get them? So if people didn't hear, the fighting hasn't stopped. U.S. made the agreement. Turkey is supposed to be the peacekeeping force, as if it's going to enforce it, and so it's a very tenuous situation. Plus, there's this autonomous militia that probably should be compared. I don't know whether you agree somewhat with the Janjaweed sort of in Darfur. This sort of militia that's going after all the people who are allied with the government and killing people, raping people, pushing people out. So those forces are completely unleashed in the region, and they have about 300,000 refugees. And the fighting, as he said, continues, even though supposedly there's been a ceasefire. So basically, he sees it as a sort of face-saving for the, the idiocy of the Trump administration and pretending they have some control over the situation.
Did he also say that
Daesh
began from one front or something?
Yeah, and he also said, so they specifically bombed the prison so they could open it up and so the Daesh prisoners could escape into Turkey. And they also took over areas where ISIS families, because you have, I think, 10,000 or so militants, and then you have a much larger number of their families who are also there. So forgive us for technical. Okay, so this is.
Yeah. This is Sevinaz.
Yeah, and I think other people should ask her questions if we can hear her.
And yeah, we are just waiting for Officer Benny.
Okay.
Oh,
Oh, great.
yeah.
So we have all 3. Okay. Abbas, welcome. Ariel, and welcome to Ossamah Mohammad, right? And we also have Sevinaz Evdike on top. So maybe we can start with Sevinaz, and please tell us what you think we should know about what's going on and about your efforts as an activist, as a women's activist in this autonomous region in Rojava. So, Sevin. Hello.
First, I couldn't hear well. I don't hear well the discussion.
Okay.
I don't know if you hear me.
We hear you. We hear you. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question again?
Excuse me? My question is, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what you'd like us to know about your activities and what's going on.
I'm Syria Evdike. I work for a film career and a filmmaker. And I'm from Syria City that has been running 8 days ago.
You're in Qamishli.
And now I'm in Qamishli. I came 2 days ago to Qamishli. But many days after Turkey started to attack Syria, I was in the terminal Hasaki. And what has been so shocking was the first bombing that took around were civilian places. The first bombing was in a place that is close to Syria, but the second was just 1 hour there was this news that certain things were not sure yet what is happening. But I speak about both kids who are homeless for 6, 7, 8 days. Now, since yesterday there is this people who are in hospital, but they have not injured to anyone. It's illegal when that's using, and those talking about that, and nobody doing any action about it. And if this is like this, the problem is the countries. Now, I want to tell you that the Olympic and about this in the men. And there was one that is saying, not for the refugees to come back. They can come back, but do not force them to come back. And this is like, those people will not come back to Turkey. First, because they killed their themselves. Second, because they start to do what we did in Russia, and they start to kill people, humiliate them, beat them, and do harm to them. And third, because we're fighting for a long time, all the people are about fighting for a good time, but still because we have the same organization that we all believe, and if we see peaceful, people and fight about Arabs, Syrians, and others, what the people and think about the same place and then come, they are not so come. Personally, if it is there, I will not come back to my hometown that I brought all my life. Because I don't believe that and I don't want to get what is happening in it. But the institution is not doing nothing. There is no real actions about it.
There's nothing to protect the civilians. So
Yes.
there's no protection for the civilians. Even though Turkey says they can come back, it's safe, they can be settled, there's no reason to trust them. So maybe we can go now to Ossamah. Can you hear me, Ossamah? Yeah. Maybe you'd like to talk yourself about your situation and your perspective. Yes. So, Ossamah, can you hear me? Oh, you're speaking, but we don't hear you. Do you have your mic? Okay, now we do. Yeah, now we can hear you.
Okay, first of all, I'm very grateful and appreciate for this opportunity to be a part from this kind of literal presentation here. And thanks for Sevinaz and for the co-chair of PYD party, Salih Muslim, and all the others too. Let me introduce, my name is Ossamah Mohammad, and I'm an activist and researcher. I'm based in Qamishli, and I still here. For the last events and issues happened with Turkey, I think first of all we have to go back and see what's happened in Afrin as an example. Turkish invaded Afrin since more than 1 year ago, and everybody in the world can see what's happening right now in Afrin. Looting, killing, raping, ethnic cleans, genocides, murders, and nobody had any act or action for it. There is no any statements from European Union, from United Nations, from United States of America about this. So actually, the genocide or the ethnic cleanings against the Kurds are already started in Syria, in North Syria, and it was in Afrin. So with the last escalation with Turkey, all the Kurdish people in North Syria have a trust of the Americans and the other coalition members that they will not control the Kurds as what the Russian did. But I'm really sorry to tell you that they left us alone to fail and to face our destiny. Everybody had a hope that United Nations, European Union, United States, that very mild, and I could see that there is a lot of objections from the Congress members, from the parliament, from DOD, but he is not listening at all. So, clearly what is happening now is a kind of ceasefire that has been agreed today, only 2 hours ago, and hopefully that this will be only for this area which is between Syria and Turkey. But the demographic change already started. We have now 300,000 IDPs who left this area and they are living in schools, in roads, with their relatives. So imagine 300,000 civilians left this area and the area is empty now. And Erdogan dreams and Erdogan plan is that he talked about it in the United Nations Assembly, and he said, I'm going to bring all the refugees in Syria to this area, and he wants to make this demographic change. And the other world in this assembly was listening and being silent. So he saw that, okay, nobody will say no for me, and he succeeded. So now, for me, I think it's good plan at least to have a ceasefire going on, and not prevent the genocide against all the people here in Northeast Syria. On the other hand, it's a good opportunity that we have a lot of strong papers also to negotiate with the Syrian regime, because now there is kind of deal that's guaranteed by the Americans that the Turks will not attack. Furthermore, the democratic Syrian administration system, which everybody we talk about, is like such a secular, democrat, gender equality, feminist, like a lot of democratic areas are separated in this region. And everybody knows that this area was the most stable area in all Syria, when there were civil war in all other parts of Syria. By the way, I met from those who support using the term of Kurdish autonomous area. I know this area is Kurds, Arabs, Assyrians, and we are all here, and we are defending our land, and we are protecting it together, and we are controlling it together. We have such a kind of social contract with all of us agreed about it. And even in Salzmann recently, you could see the Christians were sending there, the Arabs were there, the Kurds were there, fighting all of them together against the Turkish army and the groups. So these ideas will never be forgotten in this region, and hopefully we will prove for the world that we are fighting for humanity, we are fighting for spreading of this kind of democracy, gender equality for all Syria. And hopefully, if we could have again a deal, let's say with Syrian regime, which will preserve the rights of those people who are living in Northeast Syria and being part again from the government of Syria. For the Kurds and for the Arabs in this region, it will be a good opportunity. We don't know what will happen in coming days and how the negotiations will go, but at least we could preserve the Kurdish rights, and when everybody in the world just left us alone. And also, I don't mean the people, the community, the people who are going to the streets and standing up with us and making demonstrations. I mean the governments. I hope that we could convey, like send our message to the world, that we try. Yes, we have only 5 years to start this kind of system in Northeast Syria, or 7 years, but we are trying our best to have such a kind of democratic model, which can be a model for all Syria.
Thank you, Ossamah. I'm going to ask Abbas Wali to speak now. He's speaking to us from Boğaziçi University. He's famous, internationally known scholar of the Middle East and especially Kurdish regions and Kurdish politics. Abbas?
Thank you very much. We just heard very moving accounts of what is going on in Rojava or Syria from two people who lived there and breathed there, and went there, and the stories have their own sense. Our data accounts have their own stories, and this story is the story that unfolded the catastrophe before our very eyes, and very, very correct to say that there has been a lot of right progress that can be made, but when it comes to action, very little has been done about it. The story is often referred to as the anarchic despair of the Kurds. They were entering the last decades to end some, and it was very, we have had levels of basement, we have had levels of energy, we have had they have this optional thought to the story unfolded by this money when the president of the most powerful country world decided in the telephone conversation with Turkish from Syria. And that we have a good Turkey and its president, Mr. Ariel, and it fails again and tries to implement the plan that has been she has been looked at for the last basically a plan is given and basically by people on our website. But today, there's a lot said about that from this last week, and ups and downs that was the good and what he said, but good of it to say but today we took the second phase of this research. Because from my point of view, what we have on the one hand is very unrivaled power because our vendors compares even when it looks at there's the movement there, but we still have the power.
Abbas, I'm going to ask you, I know you're very emotional, but stay still when you're speaking so that you can project into the mic. Thank you.
It's been difficult, but I will do it. But today we saw the second phase of this story. That is, in a sense, what was imposed on the Turkish government by Mr. Trump's envoys, Ankara, was in fact the realization of an attempt to realize, attempt to give to Mr. Erdogan that is to give him about certain leader of an area, a so-called center of 20 miles, 20 kilometers, and in this 20 kilometers, there are very important urban areas, urban centers, cities, agricultural land, and everything. And in this, if you like, second phase, which took to the government of Ariel, and we had accepted as a ceasefire, to just say that temporary measure to see to what extent the wishes are going to be realized. On the other hand, mistreatment on Russian patients. Those that entirely left authority was through which the food distracted. Mr. Pence, Mr. Trump, even also agents and things that terrorists, and so on and so forth. But what is happening is that what is the best to the world? Rather than in this area, which includes a management by that time, factor which is left to improve the child bills for the world as a responsible stuff. And it is as a
Abbas, can I ask you what is going on inside Turkey? Is there any opposition, or is this an effort for Erdogan to appease and stir up more nationalism?
There is no systematic opposition. All the Turkish political parties, even those who are the opposition to Mr. Erdogan, have closed eyes in that direction for the opposition area in Turkey. And Erdogan wants to stop them more and so on and so forth. So it isn't at all in power government. There is the only force, the only strength to elect their institution, which is outside this non-Muslim entity.
Is the head
Yeah, it is basically, and it is decided to perspective the majority of those powers. It may be in the next election that another political process can influence it, but in this election, Kurds have ruled on both sides of the first absolutely. This is the situation, and there is a power left as part of those plans.
Yeah. I'm going to ask our other speakers to join in for a second and maybe comment. So back to Sevinaz. Would you like to add some comments to what Abbas has been saying and what Ossamah?
I have totally what Ossamah was saying, but about Abbas, I don't
It's
hear
very
what
hard to
he
hear.
was saying.
Yeah.
So
He's been talking about how the Turkish political spectrum is now united behind Erdogan. Even the opposition, JHP, supposedly, they've all towed this nationalist line. So in terms of his domestic politics, obviously this is it's also something concerned. But Abbas also said that this charade of democracy, that what we have is an elected dictatorship with the presidential system in Turkey, and in that sense, it's very close to what's happening, of course, in the United States as well. So he paralleled that. But in terms of other things you'd like to add from your perspective of what's going on?
when we speak about Turkey, we shouldn't forget millions of Kurds are living in Turkey
Yeah.
under pressure since 2015, and there is hundreds of thousands of people are in jail, their families are under threat, and they cannot do any movement like starting from Jizire, ending by going to Aintab and all the way, all the Kurds that they cannot do any movement for. And we receive messages from them saying that there is no way that you can register from the other side of the border. There were some journalists that are speaking to the Turkish people who are living next to the border, and that they are sick. You are scared to talk and to say we agree with this military operation. And we cannot do much about it, but we don't see it. And publicly, is the word.
Actually, what happened in Afrin started in Jizire, in Turkey itself. So it just spread across the border. Yeah, so it's very important. Ossamah, do you want to add something?
Thanks for everything. Obviously, like I completely agree about. I just want to add that I remember how Erdogan has this phobia of the Kurds, Kurdish phobia, let's say, and he sees everybody whose name, who's in Kurd, his nationality, he's scared about it. I don't know if he's still having nightmares about the Kurds. Remember, like the things which is happening, in Turkey too. It's very bad. There's no freedom for expression, no freedom for journalists, media is blocked, even Twitter accounts are blocked in Turkey. So I just want to add that in any part in the world, if there's any solidarity for the Kurds, Erdogan will criticize it and he will stand against it. If it's in China, if it's in Mexico, everywhere in the world, Erdogan cannot see it. And the other thing is that for us, the system which is proposed by one of the Kurdish leadership, Abdullah Öcalan, is not only for the Kurds, it's for Middle East and how we can all live in peace together in such a confederalism and such a secular system. I believe for us as a Kurds, we have our rights and should have our land, let's say, but for Erdogan, it's completely different. Erdogan's dream is like having again his Osmanian Empire, and he openly talked about it. The problem is that everybody in the world, I mean the governments, they have their strategic relations and strategic plans with Turkey, so they cannot fight against Turkey or even stand against his threats. He openly threatened European Union that I'm going to send refugees if you don't do this and this work. it's kind of dirty plan, and he just saved her publicly. He's not scared from that human rights and nothing. The Islamic groups, children of her close friends, she was killed. Having said, she was trying to establish one of the parties for Syria, for the future of Syria. Her party was called Syrian Future Party, where she believed in democracy. She supported the ideas of feminism, of gender equality, of women's rights, of democracy. And then she was killed by the radical groups who are supported by Turkey. I don't know if you saw the video of that. She was alive when they captured her in her car. And when she said she is a co-chair of a party, they just throw her on the road and crazy start shooting at her. And they say she is back from the party, she is a back from the party. Like, how can you agent these people who stay in this same thing as further and further? It's again, it's again threat for the national security for others. They cannot analyze it now or think about it now, but in coming years, when we use it again as youth become refugees and use ultimate by these terrorist groups. And in coming days, you will see it. And you could see it, as I say, in Africa and what's happening during this last operation. So my thing is that Erdogan is using the weapons in Turkey. That's why he started this attacks against the Kurds, so he sees that Syria is still strong and doing it for the Republic of Turkey, for the nationality of Turkey. That's how he tried to survive this happening internally in Turkey. And maybe hopefully there will be new cup in Turkey, and you will lose a vote.
Inshallah. Yeah. So Abbas, do you want to wrap up?
Yes.
Yes.
I would like to say something about what Ossamah said, that why the regime of Turkey is so concerned with of the Kurds, so obsessed by the Kurds and about everything doing with the Kurds and associated. I think because it's very clear, because Kurds and Turkish is a suppressed identity. And it's suppressed identity acceptable insofar as it has no voice, doesn't move, it doesn't act. When it has a voice, when it moves, when it acts, it destabilizes the sovereign identity. It destabilizes the identity, the dominant identity, which is Turkish identity. And it is very much inside this identity, because this Turkish identity defines itself by this denial. This is why they want to suppress it and kill the voice. This is wrong. The second thing I want to say, I think again, my friends are right. What we see in Rojava is an attempt to destroy not only politically, but also in room. They want to destroy in room. Destroy is rooted, it's established, but not dead. But the Kurds also, I think, they have to go their own lesson of this time and time again. This is going to repeat that any period or any attempt to create an autonomous region in an authoritarian regime entity must be neutralized through our group at this time. We see that time and time again. And this time, we show that we are now pushed in a situation where only non-guns logic is there, where women has to be protected in so far as we can. And I think much is the life of people coming before the system will be through. The other thing I think I am making a balance with this, that we once again have to fight deeply and reposition ourselves about outside forces which have given us the region. They come in and they get what they want and then they abandon and go. They leave and go. From their point of view, we can just leave. But from our point of view, are being abandoned. And not protected. And when I support my name in America, the autonomy flag and the region, although I think that very, very progressive, not that they attempted to take, or perhaps still continue somewhere. There's a very progressive, it's a dream, but this dream really needs protection.
Yeah.
This dream needs protection. This again tells me that perhaps we should rethink our position regarding a Turkish state. We really have to reconsider abandoning this idea when we are exposed to violence of others. Time and time is just, I think, it is irresponsible. To skip from the continent of first intelligence, knowing who's trying to think this issues, write about it, and then I think I should say that for a moment, people can succeed, especially that our base is for them.
Okay. We're going to, let me see, we have one more speaker. And Fuad, do you want to come and speak, or do you want to come and ask questions?
I can answer questions if there are questions. I can answer questions.
Okay.
But I've been working on.
Do you want to keep everybody on the line?
If there is a question that our audience have for our guests, we
Yeah, we
keep
have
them.
them. We have them.
If not, we can say by with them and then continue our panel.
Do you have questions for any of our Skyped in? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Just
Fuad.
come here.
Fuad, so we can see you.
Um,
They can see you. We have some questions for you from our last speaker.
So, Dr. Veli, I have a question for you. I wanted to please elaborate more on the question of the state and how you see this. We ended your talk with the statement that we don't need a state, and I agree with that. And I want to see how you view this from a strategic perspective, and how do you think this will fit into emancipatory projects for the Kurdish liberation movement? Thank you. Yes, that was good.
Sure, because this doesn't mean that I am against recovery. This doesn't mean that I don't appreciate its positive sides. It means that I disregard what he created or the chart she does in the closure, or perhaps she continues. But as somebody who has to study the regime, the region, and knows about the regimes in the region, I think I find it very difficult to imagine that when there is relationship of political if we want to build, we must first think that how we are going to implement it. Because we are living in a region led by Syria, about the our oppositional, hostile governments, the states, not just governments for but the strategic interest of this is still to suppress Turkish, if you like, suppress Turkish, political question. So that brings me back to this idea that if the situation like that, perhaps we should also start to think the idea that shouldn't so easily and so quickly abandon the ideologies. I know that the negative things about history. I know the negative things. I know the repressive things that I said about history. But I accept all of it. I know there's one of the, disasters that you can say about installations. And that's the goal. I'm looking at tired of displacement, ethnic cleansing, genocide, murder. What is the cost? I'm asking myself, what is the cost? What should we do?
And to follow with the question along the same lines that you proposed, don't you think this repression then necessitates a particular type of military state within the imaginary psyche of the Kurdish liberation movement? Precisely because we deal with enemies that treat us like enemies, that we end up with the military project?
Well, it's not just a question of enemy. I think this idea, if you like, it's impossible to think about an alternative within a state if it is regard the relationship of political, economic, cultural integrity in the autonomous region of the state. This question of integrity is very completely brought up. You see? And that's why we are told that capitalism comes from outside. We are told that, this is the natural economy. But these are not. These are not true. I, as somebody who studies the Middle East, say that it is, the lesson we learned from 1979 Iran, 1946 in Iran, 1979 Iran, and now 2019 in Rojava, in Syria, is this, that the question of autonomy has been lightly and so willingly, totally accepted. We must think it properly, we must theorize it properly, we must develop its movement. We should, instead of going around and chanting and praising, which in this word is words, I accept that. But the result, if we have to without any protection, that's what we have.
Thank you, Abbas. I think we'll end with those comments because they're really things we all have to think about. But if Ossamah and our other speaker would like to say a few words in conclusion, please do.
Yes. Something about what Abbas said.
Yes.
We learned everything that he said, but he was speaking about the history that is repeating itself, and we need to think correctly about autonomous and protection to announce this. And what I think, and it's my personal point of view, it's in the Syrian war that started in 2011, 2010. The only option for the Kurds in Syria was to announce its autonomy, because, and it is the autonomy that protected all the people who were in Rojava, not just the Kurds and not just the people who belong to Rojava. The people who come from Mecca, the foreigners who come from the mountains and other places that are aware, they need to get peace. So, step here, first because the autonomy that was able to protect them. However, if this autonomy fails, do not
Sevinaz. Ossamah will close with you. We actually have the best connection.
Yeah.
I think we have to make some differences between the Kurdish tragedy and dramatic ends. For Rojava time, it was completely different and still different from Muharram in Iran or from PRG or we have here in Rojava, it's more open to the other ethnicities and other nationalities. In PRG, it was a national system which was proposed and being applied by the Americans and being protected by them. For Rojava, the geopolitical way and plan is different. We have the Kurds here, Arabs here, Christians here. So here there was another kind of view. And that's why I am not agreeing with, I cannot ask again, I can answer again the question of my friend when he was talking about state and stateless and if we need the state or not. So if you could propose this kind of stateless democracy in Middle East, and if these areas were separated and being taught in all different regions in Middle East, the things will start to change. In Rojava, we start with the Kurds, we start with ourselves, we start to be educated in what kind of system we want. Then we went furthermore to the Arab regions. And now, in Senegal, half of the people who have been killed there are Arabs. And there is women between of them. Two of the civilians who have been killed in Qamishli, they were Christians. Many Constact who was killed, he was Ariel. So our system is completely different from autonomous Kurdish areas alongside the history when it was the majority of the Kurds. And for my method is if there was a chance and opportunity for this kind of model to be separated not only in Syria, but not only in North Syria, if there is a chance and space for it to be separated in the Middle East, you will not see any wars after them. Everybody will know how they can live together as what's happening in Europe. I think there are a lot of civil wars happening in Europe, millions of people were killed. And now the same thing is happening in the Middle East. But if people start to be educated and know how they can live together in peace and develop this kind of ideas of democracy, everything will be possible. But I don't think even the states of Europe will give the opportunity and chance for this kind of model to be growing up in Middle East. And I'm really thanks for this opportunity to have a chance.
We're enriched by your conversation. We thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, we thank you. So, and be safe all.
Okay. Thank you for you all, and continue the discussion in class if there is any question and comments. If there isn't, so.
No, I think we should just wrap up because I think what we heard was something, I know people have to go, but I think it was something very unique what we heard, and even the disagreements between the groups, between Abbas